Now, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we return to my interview with the highly acclaimed novelist, the two-time Pulitzer finalist, Russell Banks. I asked him about his historical novel, Cloudsplitter, about the abolitionist John Brown.
Well, where do we start? It took me 950 or 970 pages to get a novel that tried to encompass his life.
Cloudsplitter, why is it called?
Well, he broke through the clouds in a way. It was the name of a mountain in the Adirondacks where he had a farm, and he's buried just down the road from my house, in fact, and along with 13 of the other men who were killed at Harper's Ferry or executed afterwards.
And that was in the year?
1859. And in October, as is mostly well known, I mean, in 1859, he went into Harper's Ferry.
Assume no history is well known.
That's true, I suppose.
As it all goes down the memory hole.
But Brown sort of stood at that crossroads of religion and violence in the American imagination, and righteous wrath, if you will, or principled violence, and he was our homegrown terrorist, but he was a terrorist for a cause that certainly today we're universally in support of, which is the ending of slavery. And so his story is still a very complicated one for most Americans. And even to today, he's regarded by most African Americans as a heroic figure of the first order. Among whites, placed even above Abraham Lincoln. I mean, Malcolm X and James Baldwin and W.B. Du Bois saw him that way. And among whites, generally, most white Americans view him as a madman, well-intended madman. But nobody disagrees about the facts. The facts have been known since the day of the raid, since the time the events occurred. But it's an amazing kind of opposite views of regarding the meaning of the facts. And so that's what drew me to Brown's story more than probably anything else. It was written well before 9/11, but it does, in a way, deal with the question of terrorism. Because he was clearly a terrorist, quite a conscious and deliberate terrorist. He was killing some people in order to strike fear in the heart of many others.
I wanted to turn to your sense of place in your writing. We recently interviewed Professor Michael Zweig, who did this thorough study of the soldiers who have died in Afghanistan at the end of 2010, more than 1,400. He found the highest casualty rate across the country occurs among white soldiers from rural counties in upstate New York. Can you talk about the horrid life and characters from the North Country?
Yeah, in the town square where I live in upstate in the Adirondacks, there's I won't call it quite a shrine, but there's a memorial to all the townsmen who have been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they keep on adding a new name every few months, and everybody knows those people. Their families. It's a small town. You know these kids. You know, they've seen them go up through school. And
what
everything.
Town is that?
Keene, New York. You know their parents. You know their grandparents, and so forth. They're mostly working class, I think. They're not impoverished. They're not lost, and so on. And they tend to view the military both as a patriotic opportunity to express their patriotism and citizenship on the one hand, but also a way perhaps to get education, formal education, higher education, because they're moving in that direction. They want to enter the middle class. They're all white. The region is all white. And their parents and families are by and large extremely patriotic and vote Republican, and supported the policies of George W. Bush right down the line, and are critical of the policies of Barack Obama right down the line. Go figure.
Even though Afghanistan is now Obama's war.
Yeah, yeah, and their kids are dying in it, and so on. And I mean, and beyond that, it's hard to say. But I think it's important to note that these are they're white, and that they're striving people, the strivers, trying to enter the middle class from blue collar, from working class.
You've written fiction. That's what you're known for, your novels. You've written nonfiction, collections of short stories. Talk about the difference and what you prefer. Also written screenplays, too.
Well, I think I'm happiest writing fiction, and in particular novels. Novels seem to create for me, allow the possibility of creating for me an alternative universe that's comprehensive and large enough to let me think in ways I can't think otherwise. The tradition of the novel, and I think the rigor and the discipline of the art, forced me to be smarter than I am at any other time, and forced me to be more honest than I am at any other time, and forced me to be more attentive than I am at any other time. So in some ways, a novel allows me to be better than I am the rest of the time of my life. And I think that's why I prefer to work in that large fictional form.
And when you write the screenplay for your film, there was Affliction, there was A Sweet Hereafter. Did you? I'm
doing also Rule of the Bone and The Darling as well, yeah.
So you're controlling a lot of...
The person, whoever writes the check out ends up controlling it.
What's it like, these figures in your head become real on the screen? What is that like for you? And where are novels going these days? Is it all either movies or it doesn't happen?
No, I think they're novel is not being threatened by the film, I don't believe, or by visual media. I think that what the novel does and what films do, they're basically delivery systems for story, and the species will always require story. They're different, radically different types of delivery system. Different type of story gets delivered in film than gets delivered in the novel. But I'm not too worried about either one taking over or dominating the other, because we as human beings need the form of story that comes in a novel. It's interactive. We help create the story as we read it. And we also need and relish the form of story that gets delivered by film, where we're a passive observer and not an active participant as well. But story is what tells us finally what it is to be human beings, and we need to know. There's no other way as a species we can know what it is to be ourselves, and we're the only species for whom that's true.
Finally, what do you attribute your need to, your desire for expressing yourself through writing? You describe coming from a broken home, your dad leaving when you were 12. What contributes to, and would you say it's something you need to do?
Well, I do. I think there are several sources for it, and there are probably a lot of sources I don't even know about or aren't even aware of. I know that as a kid, in a broken home that was marred by alcoholism and violence and so forth, storytelling was a way, just within the circle of the family, for me and my brothers and so on, and for myself, to save ourselves. We could make sense of an otherwise incoherent life for children. And then as I grew older, it continued to function that way. As my world expanded beyond the family and out into the larger world, storytelling still was a way for me to make sense of an otherwise incoherent reality.
Novelist Russell Banks, author of Cloudsplitter, The Darling, Affliction, Rule of the Bone, The Sweet Hereafter. His newest book is Lost Memory of Skin.